So, I have a confession to make. I like Total Drama, but overall, I don't love it. Don't get me wrong, it's still one of my favorite cartoons for just how ambitious of a task it is to juggle so many characters, and the fact that Total Drama has never truly failed at that is a feat in itself. But it's not always fun to watch. I know this is more so a matter of preference, but early seasons especially have a lot of moments that are just really awkward or not enjoyable to sit through, in my opinion. It's not that I can't handle edginess, I just think the way Total Drama presents a lot of moments like this is either really unfunny or just framed in such a way that it's making a joke of things it shouldn't be making jokes of. Of course, this doesn't take away from the early season's strengths. Seasons 1 through 3 do still have a lot of genuinely funny moments, and I think Action, and especially World Tour, have an energy to them yet to be replicated in Total Drama sense. Like, World Tour is still what I consider the best season, in spite of its shortcomings, and I think Action is pretty underrated overall too. Island has a lot of genuine moments, including a surprising amount of emotional eliminations, but it definitely has the least going for it as far as plot and character growth, in my opinion. Roadie's also pretty fun, and All Stars is decent for a while, but there's a certain glaring problem I have with those seasons in particular that'll be discussed at some other point. And Redonkulous Race was a surprisingly good alternative, if a bit bloated in its cast size. But the season I want to talk about is one that I think gets the least credit for what it's attempting. Pakatu Island. Yeah, I don't really agree with the online consensus that this season blows at all. In fact, this is my personal favorite season. So many videos and reviews of this season on YouTube and in the subreddit seem to be pretty negative overall, only praising certain aspects or characters. Well, I'm tired of it. I'm going to convince y'all that this season is actually good. Of course, I can't convince you to claim this is your favorite, but I think I can make a pretty strong case objectively for its quality and where it does truly shine. Let's start for a recap of this series' premise. So, Total Drama started as a parody of Survivor, pretty much everyone knows that at this point, with teenage stereotypes sprinkled throughout its cast. Island in particular was praised for its surprisingly honest portrayal of teens in the 2000s, albeit exaggerated. At the time, this show was revolutionary, and its edgier humor arguably set the bar for what future Cartoon Network shows could get away with, such as Regular Show and Gumball. This setup continued into the following two seasons, with Action parodying movies within its challenges, and World Tour parodying music, as well as a lot of free pot shots at other countries. In Roadie, the show steered away from strictly teen stereotypes and instead honed in on celebrity parodies. This is evident with characters like Bea and Maria, Dawn, and so on. Some characters are more typical teen-esque in their characterization, but the new cast combined with the mutation theme spread across the original island gave a much different feel to Roadie that emphasized comedy and the scale of what the competitors had to deal with just to complete challenges. They even have cameos from previous competitors placed in many episodes for good measure. All Stars created a mishmash of these two casts on the original, now free of mutation island, with lots of callbacks to past challenges, and I will be completely honest, this season was a letdown. I don't think it was truly bad for most of the way through, just alright, but the last three episodes are what I'd easily deem the worst in the series. But that'll be for another time. All you need to know for the sake of this video is that at the end of All Stars, the island sinks, resulting in the following season having to take place on a new island. And this is where we get to Pakatu. Pakatu Island is quite a bit different from every other season in many ways. First off, the island is of course brand new and full of more wildlife than the previous one, putting a bigger emphasis on the need for survival, with challenge rewards being food. Several challenges early on even involve more simple tasks such as constructing a shelter for their team. This all adds to the believability of when drama blowouts happen, since most of the cast is probably famished and exhausted. Around the time of the merge, we find out the island is actually all artificial, basically just an enormous machine that can alter its appearance and climate at will, with all the wildlife being robotic as well. Naturally, this is quite a shock to the cast. Speaking of, hear me out on this, alright? You have a cast full of characters mostly defined by one trait or behavior, with malicious hosts to the point of actively threatening their lives without much concern in a crafted location. Either I'm out of touch with youth, or this is just PG Danganronpa. Okay, seriously though, this entire cast is bonkers, and I do mean the entire cast. Sugar is, of course, a Honey Boo Boo parody and ends up taking on the antagonist role this season. Amy and Sammy are the good and evil twin trope cranked up to 11 on both ends. Rodney is beefy but becomes comically lovesick over every girl on his team past the point of parody. Max is a Dr. Evil parody with maybe my favorite vocal performance of the entire show. Scarlet is perfectly snarky and reserved, until she's not. Sean is a surprisingly capable kinemorphophobic that's surprisingly endearing. Dave is a nice guy. Beardo is a noisemaker. No, literally, he only communicates via noises up until his elimination. Ella is totally not Snow White, guys, we swear. Leonard is a Devin Person parody that came back for Redonkulous Race. Awesome. Topher is a different take on the obsessed with the host contestant than Sierra, and by that I mean he doesn't suck. Jasmine is the tall Aussie, she's also best girl, and Sky is the determined, level-headed, crazily athletic short stack of the cast barring Max. Obviously, this cast is very far removed from the yesteryears of the Island cast, but I will be completely honest, I love them all. All of them. Maybe Danganronpa has just sort of turned on its head what I enjoy out of an ensemble cast, but something about how insane this lineup is ends up just getting a chuckle out of me 90% of the time when they're doing something or interacting, because I end up trying to process what I'm even watching. Don't get me wrong, I like Island's approach to making you really miss the characters when they would get eliminated, but when there's some characters you're just not big fans of and you're expected to sympathize or feel bad when they're gone, it doesn't work too well because not every character is going to click with everyone. Pocket 2's cast simply doesn't have this issue because every character can be rational, annoying, incompetent, hilarious, prideful. There is no limit to what this ridiculous cast is going to do, to the point where you genuinely don't know what to expect next out of them. I mean, what, are you going to tell me with a straight face you expected Scarlet or Dave to turn out the way they did? Sugar to be eliminated due to a talent show challenge? Ella to get eliminated for singing? Rodney to be overtuned to the level that he was, and so on? Later seasons of Total Drama tend to get a lot of slack for being predictable, and while I think this applies to most episodes of Roadie and All-Stars, and Pocket 2 isn't too surprising in terms of who gets eliminated each episode, I'm never bored watching Pocket 2. There's never a dull moment watching because I never know what to expect from these characters. Even rewatching the season now after it had been at least half a year since I last watched it, some jokes and moments still catch me completely off guard. And I think this is intentional. What I think Pocket 2 masters compared to every other season of Total Drama is that it is, in fact, a cartoon. Yes, Total Drama started off as a parody of a real show and tried to get the viewers attached to the characters as if they were real people, but it's also the show where an army of raccoons assembled into a Voltron-esque mech to punch a punk, so I don't think Total Drama can really fall into the camp of realistic, nor should it attempt to do so. Of course, Pocket 2 cranks this aspect up to 12, but it's not like Total Drama didn't have its completely insane moments in the past. Something I've always wanted Total Drama to utilize that I never thought it did effectively was the medium it's in. Yes, it's attempting to parody a real-life show, but at the end of the day, Total Drama is a cartoon, and I don't know quite how often the show utilizes just how crazy it can get with that concept. This is a problem I even have with Inanimate Insanity. It's much better than Total Drama in this regard and tackles more serious subjects in a better manner, but it ultimately still keeps itself grounded in its object world, and it's sort of jarring every once in a while. It feels like it should be more animated, you know? Pocket 2 feels like it took every previous idea about what Total Drama should be and jammed it in a paper shredder, and you know what? I dig it. The closest you will find to Pocket 2 Island in terms of sheer absurdity is Danganronpa and Revenge of the Island, both of which depict real-life issues in icky ways, so they're not as enjoyable in my eyes by comparison. What I'm trying to say is, Pocket 2 Island was a season of Total Drama I've always wanted Fresh TV to make. Don't just parody Survivor, make Survivor for cartoons. And I think this season excelled at doing so. Now, I know I'm in the minority on this, but I found this season comically funny as well. When something funny happens, I laugh. When something unfunny happens, it still manages to get a chuckle out of me because of how absurd the joke usually is. Heck, sometimes I'll just laugh at how certain lines are even delivered.
Grab something good and make your way to...
Yeah! She's totally right. Good call. I have some dirt on my hands, but no big deal. Let's do what she says.
There comes a time in every girl's life when she has to stop whining about her boyfriend's zombie obsession and accept that she has odd taste in men.
Those stalactites shouldn't be here.
And where should they be? Wyoming?
Like, come on, you're telling me this season isn't funny? Something else I really want to discuss regarding Pocket 2 Island is how timeless it is. Island, Action, World Tour, Roadie, and All-Stars all have elements that have aged like milk. Island especially. But I don't feel like I'm exaggerating when I say Pocket 2 only gets better over time. The complete absurdity of the cast and their interactions just generates this weird draw that no other Total Drama season really matches in my eyes. I also think this season is indicative of the progress in how Fresh TV characterizes its, well, characters. Take Island, for example, where Lashana is a walking stereotype known as the angry black woman. For the longest time, she was the only black female contestant in the Total Drama series. That is, until we get to Jasmine in Pocket 2 Island, who's a strong, sharp leader with a bad case of claustrophobia. Jasmine is a well-rounded character that is more realistic than Lashana. In spite of this, Jasmine is also comically tall and comically strong, resulting in her still fitting in with the rest of the Pocket 2 cast despite her more realistic attributes. I use Jasmine as an example of how I think total drama characterization has evolved over time, but she's not the only character I could do this with. Dave feels like a realistic take on Cody, as well as being another Indian Canadian like Noah. Scarlett and Rodney are welcome alternatives to the crazy redhead stereotype Izzy. Scarlett's nerdy without being a walking punchline. Sky is subtly implied to be Kree herself. Amy and Sammy are welcome blondies that aren't dumb or spoiled, and so on. I wish people gave Pakachu's characterization more credit overall, as I think it's definitely the right direction for how total drama characters should be created in the modern era. It's something I hope they're keeping in mind for the upcoming seasons as well. I really hope we don't just get Izzy 2 Goodbye Despair or something. The jokes I feel should also evolve in total drama. OG total drama had its funny moments, yes, but there's a lot of jokes that haven't aged even remotely well. One quick example would be the whole Owen is gay thing that kept being a punchline for all 3 seasons he competed in. A better example of this would be in episode 4 of Pakatu. The challenge is basically truth or dare, and Dave gets a dare to kiss a person next to him. Despite Sky being next to him, he first looks at Sean, who runs off. We then immediately get a confessional with Sean saying he's not certain Dave is a zombie or not and doesn't want to chance it. This joke works because the punchline isn't them kissing. The punchline is Sean not wanting to risk becoming a zombie. It's not a great joke, but it's still leagues better than what they were doing with Owen in the past. You know, in spite of the bizarre directions they took with the Pakatu cast traits, it's not hard to peel beneath the surface of them and try deducing why they might be the way they are. One quick example that's a bit more subtle is Rodney. At one point he mentions how he works with his dad and 5 brothers on their farm, but never mentions a mother. Perhaps this lack of a positive female figure in his life led to him not really knowing how to interact with females, causing him to be especially clueless when he's attracted to them. A more obvious one is Beardo. In his audition tape, he outright says that he's shy to the point where he speaks through sound effects and is bothersome until he warms up to people. I feel there's an argument to be made that Beardo might be on the autism spectrum based on what we know about him from his audition tape. Something that doesn't get talked about much in regards to autism is that children with it often have reduced muscle tone, resulting in less refined motor skills. While Beardo is shown to be fast and slow on his feet, he definitely has his moments of loafing that's not typical for even the most unhelpful of teammates like Island Noah. I feel like you could argue there's a statement being made here about how others look down on those on the spectrum. Granted, I'm reading between the lines a little bit by this point, but most of what annoys Dave, as an example, is the traits previously mentioned, and it's ultimately Beardo's behavior that gets him eliminated. It's implied that Dave and Sugar at least voted for Beardo, Leonard most likely as well, leaving Ella, I suppose, as the definitive vote. Interesting that they'd have even one of the most optimistic characters in the series attributed to this. But yeah, Beardo is viewed as the weakest link and looked down upon for his contributions, which sort of makes it all the sadder when, as he's shot out of a cannon, he talks about how nice it was to meet everyone. The autism-coded character is booted first because he's viewed as a liability to the team. That's a surprisingly poignant message for a character who makes fart noises. All this potential depth for a character that was in a single episode. I think you understand where I'm coming from when I say there's a nuanced amount of depth to the Pakatu cast that I don't think has quite been unearthed yet, and I've only shared a few examples. The depth they gave to a lot of these Pakatu characters I feel is unfortunately overshadowed by the larger-than-life stereotypes of the past that simply don't have as much depth as people think. Now let's see what statement the writers are making with Mike. No, another time. But never mind character depth. What actually goes on in the season plot-wise? Well, let's take a look. So there's obviously 2 core relationships that take place, Sean and Jasmine as well as Sky and Dave, both of which have different purposes. But every character in this season serves a purpose. There's the obvious already mentioned with Beardo, as well as the absolute Chad Leonard. What a marvelous character, capable of soothing the most butthurt of fans. His return in Redonkulous Race is the stuff of legend and okay, this bit's boring. Jokes aside, Beardo and Leonard also serve another purpose, which is to attach us to Dave. Dave has a similar design color scheme to Mike, while also having hints of Cody and Noah in his personality. Basically, he's been crafted to be an instant fan favorite from the start, especially when he acts as the straight man for Team Muskwalk, which is meant to counteract where he ends up by the end of the season. Amy is the necessary evil sibling for Sammy to overcome. I'll admit though, I was surprised at how quickly they got to this plot. My guess is maybe the writers weren't having fun writing Amy being mean to Sammy and decided they wanted her out sooner rather than later. It's perhaps a bit disappointing that Sammy didn't last longer on her own, but her arc finishes as soon as she gets Amy eliminated anyways, so it's not a huge deal. My guess for why she goes when she does is to ensure Jasmine stays distanced from Sean for a bit, as Sammy likely would have helped them reconcile sooner otherwise. It's neat timing that makes Jasmine giving Sean the cold shoulder a bit more realistic. Rodney, Scarlett, and Max are characters I plan to have their own section dedicated to outside of this. Don't worry, I will get to them. Ella ties into Dave and Sky more, surprisingly enough, which I'll also get to. Otherwise, she's a victim of Sugar's misguided competitive nature, illustrating just why Sugar is this season's antagonist, as well as allowing the writers to flex that they can still write songs for TD even after World Tour by giving her one of the most iconic eliminations in the series. Topher comes off as the most filler-y character in the cast, but he's pretty entertaining and it establishes Chris as the rightful host of the show in the process, so it gets a pass. And outside of the relationship plots, the last character left to discuss really is Sugar, a very interesting take on a total drama antagonist. Early on, she sides with Leonard's bizarre plans for challenges, actively undermining her team in the process, while simultaneously growing a one-sided rivalry with Ella. This eventually leads to Ella being disqualified for singing after Sugar rats her out. After this, Sugar proceeds to excel in challenge after challenge, hindering Sky and Dave's relationship in the process by interfering whenever they're about to kiss, as well as winning the most immunity out of anyone in the merge. She also ends up being the one that ultimately takes down Scarlett, just in case it wasn't obvious enough that she's this season's antagonist. She then allies with Sky while at her emotional weakness and ends up betraying her and sabotaging Jasmine during the challenge, leading to Jasmine ultimately getting eliminated. She receives her comeuppance by doing the worst in the talent show challenge, something she was supposed to be good at. Overall, I find Sugar to be a very entertaining and well-done antagonist, and she's utilized in a way that's very refreshing compared to Scott and Mal the past 2 seasons, who felt exaggeratedly evil. Okay, so now we're left with the relationship plots and a few stragglers. Well, Sean and Jasmine's relationship is admittedly not complicated. Jasmine finds Sean cute and respects his survival skills. They both inevitably learn to open up to making connections with people. It's simple, but they're both such enjoyable characters and have such natural chemistry that it's not really an issue or anything. It's also worth noting their relationship doesn't really start to come full force until after Sky and Dave pretty officially sever ties and hurl and go seek. Oh boy, on to the big kahuna. Arguably one of the most divisive couples in all of Total Drama, Sky and Dave. So here's the thing. I admittedly don't have much to say about Sky. Sky was focused on the competition and made that clear to Dave. There's really not much to discuss here, though the whole kissing him to motivate him to help you in the finale? Sky, it's a big red flag that was necessary to get him to help you in the first place. Anyways, I can talk more about Sky once we discuss Dave. So, Dave is interesting in that he sucks, but that's why I like his character. What I find fascinating about Dave and Sky's relationship is that there's sort of a harsh reality to the dreamlike scenario presented with Mike and Zoe and Rhodey, and to a lesser extent All-Stars. And personally, this is very refreshing. I really like how in a season full of bizarre characters they decided to make their relationship plotlines grounded, but for completely different reasons. Sean and Jasmine were able to meet halfway by being emotionally available to each other, while Sky and Dave simply couldn't. Sky couldn't because it wasn't a priority for her, and Dave couldn't because he grew an entitlement complex. But anyways, the reason why I point out how Sky and Dave are meant to be the antithesis of the Mike and Zoe relationship is present with Ella. See, I told you we would come back to her. Ella ends up gaining a crush for Dave when he slips her shoe back on after it came off like in Cinderella. Yes, it's just as ridiculous as it sounds, just go with it. Ella finds out Dave actually has feelings for Sky instead and is distraught. So, to the viewer by this point, it seems pretty out of nowhere, like, okay, what was the point of that? Well, Dave has a certain line during one of his confessionals in the finale where he says that this story's gonna have a happy ending where the boy gets the girl. And I think you know where I'm going with this. Ella sort of represents this happy ending dream that Dave is talking about, as unlike Sky, she's immediately emotionally available to him, and it's something the audience is allowed to pick up on without just spelling it out. In the end, Dave is nothing more than a statement about nice guys, with a big part of this season hinging on all the bizarre contestants seeming tame compared to him. Oh, well, I'm not like them, Sky. You have to go out with me because I'm not like them. I'm normal. I'm a good guy. It's almost like comparing the Disney villains rogue gallery to Frollo. Like, sure, the others may be more radical, but Frollo's the most realistic, and that makes him one of, if not the most intimidating. This is what I believe they had in mind with Dave, and they made it very effective by letting the audience naturally get attached to him from the start and slowly lose interest in him over time. Almost like how Sky slowly loses interest in him over time. She interacts with him the most, but eventually misses him less and less and starts seeing flaws in him, most notable in the finale. While I think this message is very effective, I do wish they would have expanded on its conclusion a bit more. The fallout scene in the finale is nice, but it feels like things wrap up a bit too quickly after it happens. It's probably the one thing I would actually criticize about the season, is like the last couple minutes not fully utilizing them to the best they could. But the context of the message the two relationships were trying to get across, I think they were rather effective overall. Relationships take commitment and communication. Sean and Jasmine is what happens when those prevail, while Sky and Dave are what happens when both flounder. Oh, and I guess I should clarify which ending I prefer, Sean winning or Sky winning. Here's the thing. For the longest time, I had no hesitation saying Sean, but the more I think about it, I think Sky makes a lot more sense. Hear me out on this. In both endings, Sean and Jasmine reconcile, and Sky and Dave do not. In Sean's ending, Jasmine pulls Sean out of the snow and they agree to split the cash. Sky is later shown to seem content on the plane, for some reason. In Sky's ending, Sky is carried off on a stretcher by Chef, happy that she won. Jasmine pulls Sean out of the snow and they reconcile. Sky is later shown to seem content holding her cash on the plane. Dave gets mauled in both. Essentially, while I think Sean's ending is better written than Sky's, he doesn't need the win to reach the end of his arc. What message is being pushed by Sky losing? For communicating poorly with Dave, who was simply not giving her the proper chance to, she deserves to lose? I feel like the message is much stronger in this scenario. Sky wins. She stuck to the plan of just being a strong competitor without burning bridges, and the only enemy she really made was Dave, which wasn't really her fault. On top of this, there's a theory that the canon winners are the ones who do some big action in the end of each season. So like in Island, it was Owen running from the Brownings, thus it makes sense for him to be the canon winner. In Action, it's Beth bringing Duncan with her to the aftermath. In World Tour, it's Heather taking down Alejandro. In Rhodey, it's Cameron striking the lightning on Lightning. And in All Stars and Redonkus, it doesn't really make a difference. Though in Redonka's case, I prefer the Surfers winning because the Cadets get a completed arc either way, and the Surfers just deserve it more. In Pagatu's case, it's Sky stomping due to how unfair her situation is, resulting in the artificial mountain they're on caving. All of this, and she's also the winner in Canada. So, while I understand why some people prefer Sean winning, I simply think Sky as the winner is a much more fitting conclusion. I just wish the ending sequences were written better in general to reflect this. So, that leaves the last three characters I've yet to mention. Scarlett, Max, and Rodney. Ignoring the theory I'm about to put out for a second, Rodney has a purpose in that his confusing behavior allows Jasmine to become pretty scattered emotionally, allowing the big scene with her and Sean episode 5 as well as her anger at him to feel natural and justified. Aside from that, he looks nice when standing alongside the rest of the cast because he's designed after a Disney character, something that does matter when discussing total drama casts. Okay, now on to the big theory. So, Max and Scarlett seem to be the odd contestants out in all this, right? While all this relationship drama and sugar being sugar is going on, Scarlett is following along on Max's failed attempts at enacting evil, with her eventually having enough and taking control of the island, revealing herself to be truly evil. This would have been enough on its own for me personally, as I find Bruce Dow's performance of Max to be fantastic. Almost every line he delivers gets a chuckle out of me, and Scarlett's dry but more and more scathing humor is pretty entertaining as well. They create great interactions between the two of them. However, what throws me off is these two's audition tapes. Weird thing to be confused about, but bear with me. Max's audition tape is pretty comical, him talking about how evil he is and all the evil he plans to do, while also discussing how he doesn't have time to determine just how evil he is due to his French horn lessons and babysitting getting in the way. Any reality TV executive would pick up Max for an audition tape like this. It has everything you'd look for in a memorable contestant. So, watching Scarlett's audition tape by comparison feels pretty jarring. She explains what her name means, explains how she has bigger plans than her name's meaning, says Total Drama is responsible for the troubled behavior of today's youth, and then signs off. What? That's a pretty boring audition tape. The only hint anything interesting we get out of her is the globe hanging in the background with a steak knife and a butcher's knife stabbed through it, but that's it? It feels completely different from Max's audition tape by comparison, where it's easy to see why a television executive would want him on their show. Entertainment for people that like him, and entertainment for people that don't like him when he gets inevitably hurt. So, what's going on? Well, are we sure Scarlett is a typical contestant? Think about it. Why would Chris be remotely okay with her taking control of his island that could potentially get the other contestants killed if it self-destructs, and not really seem that worried? It's not like he hasn't shown concern for his contestants in the past, so what's the difference here? Unless that's the point? What if this is actually a planned challenge? I mean, I know Chris has gotten more malicious in these seasons as time went on, but surely not to the point where it'd be okay with the contestants dying, right? Personally, I think it might have all been an act, although in the context of the show it happened at an unexpected time for him. I think Max was considered to be their ratings golden goose, so they decided to add Scarlett to the cast to not only interact off of him to get the most out of his segments, but also to inevitably play the part of being evil and taking over the island, hence why Chris seems to show no true signs of concern. I mean, Duncan was hauled off to jail for blowing up a house. Scarlett takes over the entire island and just gets eliminated? That's it? This could also be why Max gets saved from elimination several times, like when Ella gets eliminated instead of him for singing, or he gets swapped to the other team while he's still on the hot seat. This type of interference wouldn't be out of place after all. Chris messes with Dave constantly in this season, likely to fuel more drama. Essentially, Scarlett might be a planted contestant, and as soon as Scarlett had to go, Max did too. Not only because he no longer had Scarlett to interact with, but also because he was the one that ultimately caused the island to glitch out in the first place by vomiting on a tree full of motherboards. And if you think Chris has no power over how certain events play out in Total Drama, it's time to direct you to Rodney. Rodney's elimination is weird. In the final episode of the season, it's made sort of obvious that Chris manipulated who the helpers would be for each finalist, which makes one wonder if Rodney might have also been set up. What if Rodney wasn't going over well with fans and executives told Chris to make a challenge that axes him, hence why he gets nothing but truth questions for a while? It even gets to the point where Kina Sawak technically shouldn't have been tied with Muskwalk, but due to an incorrect display of the team tallies, the tiebreaker happens anyways. It's almost a bad joke how quickly and mercilessly Rodney goes from relevant to kick off the show. A similar thing actually happens near the start of Rhodey, where the Toxic Rats technically should have won the first challenge, but didn't, and technically should have won the first half of episode 2's challenge, but ended up leading to a tie instead because they just straight up didn't count B's point for whatever reason, even though it's right there in the script with Chris outright saying they gain a point for it. It makes one wonder if decisions like this are there to hint at later seasons of Total Drama being in-universe manipulated to keep things interesting or to appease executives. It's not like there aren't real-life reality shows that have scripted moments. Perhaps that's what's happening here. Or it's a slip up on the writers to make Scarlett so cartoonishly evil and to have Rodney go out in such comedic fashion. But therein I feel lies the beauty of Pahkitew Island. So by this point in the video, you probably feel pretty lost, like you have no idea what this video even was, why it felt so scattershot, why the video just felt so chaotic despite being entertaining. Which, by the way, thank you for still being here if you've made it this far. Consider subscribing if you want to see more videos like this. The thing is, this video experience is exactly what I feel whenever I watch Pahkitew Island. I love that this season is chaotic but realistic, bizarre but grounded, entertaining and yet baffling. This season in particular of Total Drama is an anomaly. Every character in its cast is an anomaly. The way it's structured and the elimination order is an anomaly. And yet it's by far the season I enjoy thinking about the most. Total Drama tends to have this ability to stick with people long after they've watched it. For some people, it's Lindsay standing up to Heather. For others, it's Heather's redemption as she takes down Alejandro. For me, it's this season. This season is fascinating to me because there's always something to think about. It never fails to entertain me, nor does it ever fail to get the wheels in my head spinning. I feel like this duality is one of the greatest appeals of Total Drama in general. And for me personally, no season captures this bizarre beauty quite like Pahkitew Island. If it's been a while since you've seen Pahkitew Island or you're still not convinced, I implore you to give it another chance in 2022. Go into it with an open mind. Don't expect Total Drama Island or any other season because it's simply not that, nor is it trying to be. Pahkitew Island is not like any other show I've ever seen, let alone any other Total Drama season. You don't even need to analyze it extensively like I have to fully enjoy it. I personally think the season is naturally funny, ironically or not. And even if you don't enjoy every character like I do, I have a hard time believing you won't be able to find at least one or a few characters that you do enjoy. And isn't that what ultimately makes Total Drama so fun? If you ever decide to boot up Pahkitew Island again, simply sit back, relax, and just have a good time. as you watch outlandish teens try to become famous.